All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Chelsea and my role at the TAC is managing the two road safety grant programs. So obviously the local government grants, which we are speaking about today, but then also the community road safety grants, which is another grant program that some of you may be familiar with. In terms of today's presentation, so what we're really hoping is that after this you can take away some really good insights into the program and a few tips that will help you to put together your applications. So we've really tried to pull out, some of our the lessons learned from previous rounds and some of the things that we tend to see in those really strong applications. In terms of how the presentation is going to flow, I'll give a quick overview of this year's program, and then what we're going to do is CB and I will have a little bit of a chat about the 5 assessment criteria. So those 5 criteria that the assessment panel go through when assessing an application. And then, as CB said, Ken is here and he is going to actually speak about the more technical side of things with projects. So he'll speak about some recommendations, but then also speak a little bit about the technical assessment and how that works. So in terms of this year's program, if you are familiar with this grant program and you've had a look at the guidelines, you'll realise that not too much has actually changed from the past few years. So the program focus is still really on local road safety projects that prioritise the safety of pedestrians and cyclists whilst considering safe system principles. So that's our general scope. In terms of what we offer, so we have 2 funding streams. We've got our analysis grants. So the analysis grants are available up to $30,000. And the analysis grants are those really analysis investigative style work that we're looking at the early stages of a project. So we're looking for the investigation of road safety issues or the development of speed management and infrastructure treatment concepts. So the other funding stream is our infrastructure grant. So the infrastructure grants are available up to $100,000. And with those grants comes a matched conditional one-to-one contribution from local government as well. And with these grants, so what we're looking for is the implementation of low-cost infrastructure solutions or the trialling of innovative new infrastructure solutions. So obviously both of those streams need to be really aligning to that overall scope of pedestrian and cyclist safety. In terms of how many applications, this is a question we get quite a bit. So it's 1 application per funding stream per LGA. So that's 1 analysis and 1 infrastructure if you choose to do that. And applications are open, so they open on Monday. Hopefully you would have received a notification that the round had opened and open till the 28th of July. And just a little note, we've just got the website up there, so any information on the grant program can be found on our local government grant website. Just before I jump into the assessment criteria, I just wanted to paint a little picture about this grant program. So it is a highly competitive grant program, and what we've seen over the last 3 years is a real growth in this program. I think last year we had 70 applications, the year prior was 50, and the year prior to that was 40. So we're definitely seeing more applications coming through each year. And along with that is we're seeing stronger applications as well. So from an assessment perspective, that naturally makes assessors kind of look and expect a little bit more from applications. Okay, so the first assessment criteria that we look at, if you think about this with your application, this is the first set of questions that assessors will see. So my big tip here with this section is really take your time to set the scene and paint the picture. So you really want to clearly state what the local road safety issue is, and then also how are you actually going to address that. So I think with this one, so this is really, as assessors are moving through your application, this is what they're always going to come back to. So do they understand what the road safety issue is? and do they understand what you're then going to do to address that? So really take your time to get that. So the project description, your deliverables and objectives, really nice and clear so it doesn't leave any questions in the mind of the assessors. Within this part as well, so within your rationale, we actually ask for evidence to support or demonstrate that project need. So with regards to this, so look, understand every local government area is really, really different. Every local road safety issue is going to be a little bit different. So we expect that the type of evidence that is used to support your application is going to be different as well. So I encourage you to really think broadly about the type of evidence you use to support your project rationale. So it might be crash-based data, which can be obtained off the TAC stats page, risk-based data, so things like pedestrian and cyclist counts, or maybe a safe system assessment or something like that to really demonstrate the risk is useful. But also community support is really, really valuable as well. And CB will talk a bit more about this later, but don't underestimate community inquiry or community support as evidence to support your rationale. So, and I guess don't just tell us that the community is supportive or that you've had inquiries. You need to be able to show that. So have you got a log of community inquiries or complaints or support letters or something like that that you can attach to your application is beneficial. And I guess from an assessor perspective, if we look at all those really strong applications in this section, what you really need to have is a detailed project plan. So high-level project plans make it really hard for assessors to understand the project and those key milestones and activities. So really make sure that you take the time here to provide quite a detailed project plan so you can really demonstrate council's ability to be able to deliver the project as well. So the second assessment criteria, it's pretty self-explanatory, but both of the TAC road safety grants were a concept developed out of the previous strategy and carry on to this, the new strategy that's been recently launched. So what we're looking for here is we obviously need to see that real alignment of your project to the strategy and I guess the TAC's overall road safety vision. So I guess don't just try and find a project that you've got and retrofit it to fit within the scope of this program. We want to see that really genuine alignment to the strategy. And within this as well is that you have prioritised safe system thinking. So we want to see that you are considering the separation of vulnerable road users, speed reduction, all those kinds of measures. And I guess with this one, CB alluded to earlier, so what we actually offer is 30 minutes of pre-application technical support for each LGA. So I really encourage you to take us up on that offer. You can just contact us via the local government grant email and we'll set up a 30-minute consult so you can just make sure that your project really does align with the scope of this grant program and obviously safe system thinking as well. And I guess the last thing within this assessment criteria is we want to see that this isn't a standalone project. So we want to see that this project is, I guess, a part of a bigger overall picture, or at least demonstrate how it integrates with other council programs or plans. So it might be a part of your active transport strategy and another investment program or something along those lines. So, or maybe it's one smaller infrastructure project that is part of a bigger overall initiative. So we want to see that integration of the project. Okay, value for money. This assessment criteria is really quite important for this grant program because we do emphasise that we're looking for low-cost infrastructure solutions. So look, understandable that sometimes the low-cost option isn't the best, and so that's not what we're prioritising you do here, but we at least need to see that you have, I guess, tried to save some costs where possible. So we encourage you to get really creative with how you do this, and we've seen some great applications come through the last few years that have been quite innovative in their thinking around ways to reduce project costs. So it may be the design choice, and I'm not a technical expert, so I won't give you examples of that, but I'm sure Ken can later on. But also maybe it's potentially the materials that you choose to use. So is there a lower cost alternative? Or maybe you can choose a material that has better longevity, so then it potentially saves costs over the life of the project. Or another really creative way we've seen is, I think it was in last year's round, is a council actually used the community engagement, but used the results of that community engagement across two separate projects. So two separate projects, but that sat within the same area. So they were able to sort of piggyback on the engagement work that had been done for another project rather than outlay more costs for the next project. So yeah, it's just about thinking about little ways that you can potentially save some costs there. We want to see sustainability beyond the TAC funding. So this is seed funding. You can't come back and apply for a grant next year to then build on this project. So what we're looking for is at least that consideration of how is this going to be sustained beyond the funding. So is it integrated within council's maintenance plan, or are there other works that potentially need to happen that need to be accounted for as well? So it's just about that consideration there. And in terms of, I guess, again, looking at those really high scoring applications, similar to the project plan, you must include a detailed and realistic budget. So budgets that have potentially maybe 2 line items tell an assessor absolutely nothing in terms of value for money or about the project as a whole. So again, I really encourage you to provide quite a detailed budget breakdown so that we can really understand where the allocation of funds is going. And to support that, again, this is those really high scoring applications, is that you've got quotes to be able to support your funding request. So, and I think this is good. Like, you may not be able to save costs somewhere, but if someone's gone to the effort of potentially sourcing a couple of different quotes for something, we can at least see that you're attempting to maybe save some costs where possible. Okay, so the last one I will speak about before I hand over to CB is the project monitoring and evaluation. And this assessment criteria, I guess we often find that not a lot of time is spent on the project monitoring and evaluation part, but I really strongly encourage you to take the time to do your evaluation plan. So we really need to see how you're going to measure whether you've achieved your project objectives. So TAC places a really strong emphasis on project evaluation. So for us, we expect that that's going to carry on into any projects that we fund. And also consider, I guess, your evaluation and reporting is how we can measure the objectives, whether we're meeting our overall objectives of this grant program. So that's really important to us. So things to include your evaluation design, how are you going to collect data? What type of data is being collected? Is it just traffic or pedestrian and cyclist counts, or are you actually going to go out into the community and get that community sentiment as well? I also encourage you to consider, so depending on your project, so if it's an analysis project, in terms of your evaluation, we're actually looking at more of that strategic alignment. So does the work that you've done potentially align with other council initiatives, or does it align with council's overall road safety vision? Does it align with safe system principles? So they're the kind of things we're looking for in an analysis evaluation, not so much the potential infrastructure options that are then going to result out of your project. So just really keep it specific to this, this particular project. In terms of, again, looking at the really strong applications, what we're starting to see is we know that road safety can't be tackled on its own. We know it's a much broader issue and we need to take quite a multi-sectorial approach. So I encourage you to really think about your project beyond road safety. So obviously that is the priority of this grant program, but are there additional benefits that can come through your project? So it might be related to health. So if it's active travel, we're seeing healthier people, more physical activity. Is it about community safety as well? Like, are there some additional benefits that come from your treatment that improve the safety within the community? Social connectivity, all of those sorts of things. So I encourage you, if you can, think a little bit broadly beyond just road safety. And I guess the last thing here is we want to know what works and what doesn't. So don't be afraid to report on things that maybe haven't gone the way you had expected. In this program, we really support trials, pilots, and innovation. So we really encourage and expect there's going to be some reporting where things haven't gone the way that you had potentially thought. And that's absolutely fine. It's a learning for all of us. So yeah, we do encourage you to share that information as well. Okay, so I'm going to actually hand over to CB now, who will speak about partnerships, community engagement, and capacity.
Thank you, Chels. So what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about this particular criteria and questions that are asked. So this is sort of the key themes around the questions that are asked in the template. So community engagement is key. And it's a really important area. And what we want to see here is evidence that the community support what it is that you're proposing. And we want to know, if you're not quite sure, then how are you going to engage the community to find out during this process or during this project timeline? We obviously acknowledge that community engagement at the moment is kind of tricky with restrictions with COVID and how that's changing. So we're really understanding of that. But I guess what I would say is also we've learned a whole lot about how to engage differently and in different ways that are kind of, you know, going to be okay regardless of what's happening in terms of restrictions. So just keep that in mind. And if you've got a preference, but maybe have a backup plan as well. And we're really understanding of that. So what we want to know also is who you're going to be working with to implement these projects. So, and what is their role? So really this is about your stakeholder mapping and telling us maybe, you know, obviously there's the obvious ones, but who else and why are they going to be involved in, and what's their sort of influence or particular role they're going to play within the project. And we also ask about capacity and capabilities. So really this is talking about, you know, how are you going to manage the project? Who's going to be doing the engagement work? Will you be pulling in some additional support from other departments or something like that for that? So really just talk to us about that in a little bit of detail as much as you can. It's going to, there we go. So I'll just go a little bit more in depth into community engagement from a road safety perspective, but also just these are general community engagement kind of considerations to think about when you're planning your projects and putting together your applications. So really it's think about the type of project. So if you're looking at an analysis grant, that might be a little more strategic in its nature. So therefore, the kind of level of engagement that you might want to think about could be more in depth. So you really want to be consulting, or you might want to be, you know, going out and wanting to hear some views from people to really help, you know, form a piece of information that's going to make that project up. So think about, yeah, the type of project that you're proposing. If it's a more specific infrastructure type project where it's, you know, you've got your plans, you know what you're doing, and maybe there's been some engagement in the past, please tell us about that and how you've got to where you've got to. And then obviously it's thinking about, well, how do we then close the loop? If we've been talking to the community about this for some time, we're going to propose that this is our solution for the issues that they're talking about. So how are we going to get them involved? How are we going to inform them about the decisions that we're making? And how will we let them know how it's gone? So just think about those particular areas for the more specific projects that are being proposed. We've seen some really great things around data analysis and virtual ways that people can get involved with different platforms. So they're really exciting, and we encourage those as ways of gathering data from community. So scope and context, again, going back to what is it that we're doing? What is it that you're proposing in your project? So if your level of participation is simply informing the community that you're going to be undertaking the project, and that's fine, but give us a really good picture about how you're going to do that. If it's around more you're going to consult or you're going to collaborate, so I'll reference the IAP2 here, which many of you will be really familiar with, because I think most councils use that as their sort of under their policy that sits underneath their engagement frameworks. So have a look at that and have a look at how are we asking the community to participate, what level, and then what's our promise to them? What are we going to say that we're going to do as part of this work that we're undertaking? think about negotiables and non-negotiables. So where can the community have a say? Where can they actually have some influence? So it might be on a particular component of the project and not the whole entire thing, and just be really clear with us about what that is, so that we understand where they're having some involvement. And then obviously who. So I touched on this before around the stakeholder mapping. So tell us about your different community groups that might be involved or have been involved. So we can talk about sort of projects about, you know, there might have been some council planning engagement work that happened a long time ago, but that's somehow, you know, been the journey of where you've got to with your particular project. So tell us about all of that work and how they were engaged in the different groups. And then in terms of if it's an infrastructure delivery project, so how are you actually going to, what's the role of the key stakeholders and what level of influence will they have on the project? And is there any others? So is there, you know, chambers of commerce? Is there traders groups? Is there, you know, and what's going to be their role? That's all on from me about the partnerships and community engagement. There was a little question which I'll just kind of bring up now because it fits, which is around, do we need to provide the specific inquiries for community support, or will a summary suffice? Well, a summary is great if you've got lots of community data that you need to talk about, so you can talk about key themes of what you've been hearing. But if you've got sort of a handful of inquiries that you want to support, want to sort of show as evidence, then just attach them if it's easy, because then we can kind of see, you know, if there've been inquiries come through customer service or something like that. We can kind of get a feel for what the community is saying about the particular issue. So I think that's all from me. I think there's some really great resources out there around community engagement too, which I think we provided last year and we can do again, around the IAP2, around Kapir has some really good free engagement guides, particularly around engaging in COVID, but we'll make sure that we provide those for you as well. So thanks, Chels.
Hey, thanks, CB. Okay, Ken, I am now going to hand over to you to have a bit of a chat about the technical side of things.
Thanks, Chels, and thanks, CB. That's a great introduction for me. Just grabbing my slides now. Hopefully you can see that, and let me know, Chels, if you can't see that.
That's perfect, Ken.
Good. And I was having a flick through the list of participants, people on the call here. It's wonderful to see some of the legends of local government road safety in there, some people new to the game, and people who have submitted in the past, and some people I haven't seen their names before, but I'm excited that others are getting involved in this program because it is a really exciting program for local government, and I am excited to take you through a few of the, I suppose, technical elements of mainly the infrastructure projects, give you a few tips and ways that the assessors might be looking at a few of those areas. So the first thing I want to do is point you at a document. It's actually an Austroads document here, and it's the integration of a safe system with movement in place for vulnerable road users. Some of you may have seen this document, but what I really like about it is that it goes through quite a variety of infrastructure treatments and shows their alignment with safe system principles. And the key things that this program is looking for, or that'll be ranked the highest by the assessors, are addressing that injury severity, given a crash occurs, and the exposure to crashes. Or exposure to crash risk. And what you see is in this document, there are these nice little tables here that put ticks next to different infrastructure treatments in that severity, likelihood, exposure. So you get an idea of what you're addressing with your treatment. So have a look at that one. Likelihood of crashes is really important, but in this program's really, there's that focus on what is the severity, what is the harm that's going to happen, and how can we minimize that? So to elaborate just a little bit on that, and those who have done the Safe System Assessment course or have done Safe System Assessments, we really quite attuned to this exposure, likelihood, and severity of crash. But let me just show you a few treatments that represent some of those elements. So exposure, so we can address exposure by removing that conflict. So it could be something like closing off a road to vehicles or closing off a point of the road to vehicles. So we're reducing the volume of vehicles going through an area, and then there's less exposure to crashes involving vehicles versus cyclists or pedestrians. And maybe it doesn't need to be as elaborate as this one, as expensive as this one. It could be a much cheaper treatment that still gives us that same outcome of the reduced exposure to crashes. The separation of vulnerable road users, so separated cycle facilities, separated pedestrian facilities, or separated shared paths, again, is a wonderful way to address the exposure to crashes. Here's an example of utilising existing road space to try to keep costs down, utilising the parking here as a separating facility. And I'm sure many of you have seen similar treatments. So those are going to be looked at really favourably by the assessors in this program because they really align highly with safe system principles, but also the road safety strategy for Victoria in talking about some of the ways to address vulnerable road user injury. Likelihood, it's going to be a bit harder if you're just putting up likelihood treatments to be successful with the funding application. And those are things like just line marking treatments or lighting treatments or pedestrian refuges. We know these are good road safety treatments, but we want to be assured that we're looking at the exposure and the severity as well. So some of the situations in this program that you could be funded with just likelihood factors is if the severity has already been addressed in another way. So you already might have an area of quite low speed, and now you're looking to supplement that with some likelihood reducing elements. So have a think about what you're doing there and if you can address those exposure and severity. And some of the absolute classics that we know just are wonderful treatments that align really highly with safe system principles are wombat crossings, because we're getting the reduction in speed on the approach to the crossing and through the conflict point. And we're getting a reduced likelihood because pedestrians are elevated, easier to see, the priority is clear. So those sorts of treatments are just wonderful. We often get a bit of pushback on wombat crossings or raised pedestrian crossings due to some different elements. It could be the drainage. It could be concerns about buses or heavy vehicles. And I want you to think, okay, it's not the treatment as such that people are so excited by. It's the outcomes that you get from it, the reduced speed especially. And so that can be done with other treatments. So this one here, you'll see some cushions being used. So the buses can straddle the cushion, but the speeds are still going to be down there, and the priority through there for pedestrians and cyclists with a shared path facility. So you can think, broadly about how we get these outcomes that we're looking for. Remember to pop your questions into the chat as I'm going, because CB will be collating those and asking different questions as we go. So don't wait till the end to pop your question in. As you think of it, jot it straight into the chat. I'm going to briefly talk to you about the technical assessment now. And so the assessors will be looking at quite a variety of things. I'm going to take you through what they need to see, how they make calls on appropriateness of treatments, feasibility of the actual proposed infrastructure, the approvals and proof of approvals that are required, budgets, evaluation, innovation, grouping of treatments, and then what the recommendations will be from the assessors. Now, Chels has done a great job in covering off a few of these, so I'll just elaborate a little bit on what was said. So when you're producing that application for an infrastructure treatment, the assessors need to see some design detail to understand what is being proposed, and that's really to establish, can this be built, where they're saying what are some of the hurdles that they're going to have to get through to build that, and is it going to resolve the issue that they have clearly presented in the application. So it is about understanding the specific location and then some of the key design elements. So something like this is great, which has enough detail for the assessors to really be able to see what's going on, where it's happening, how it's all going to connect. But you don't necessarily need to have as much detail as that. Something a little bit more conceptual, like this one, would be adequate, because the assessors can clearly see where it's going to be placed and the key features of the treatment. And that way that they can say, oh, okay, well, we've got a drainage pit here. I wonder if they've thought about that. Or, okay, the lighting is actually just down the road. So I wonder, is this going to be an issue for lighting? We've got raised parts of the road. How are they going to be lit? So the assessors will be working through that, and they need enough detail to be able to do that. But it can be kept at a conceptual level. The words straight out of the guidelines here, and really do have a look at the guidelines, because all of this is really clearly put into the guidelines. But it says that, you know, the detail of the design should be really suitable for a preliminary design stage road safety audit. Now, you don't need to do that preliminary design stage audit, but that's an indication of the level of detail expected. And I know a lot of you out there are very familiar with getting those audits done, so you'll know that level of detail to provide. So here's a hypothetical example of probably something that wouldn't be seen so favourably by the assessors for the infrastructure grant. So, I mean, nice that we've got a raised pedestrian crossing on Wombat Crossing proposed and a sort of generic design, but then sort of saying, yeah, we're going to put one in this general area and somewhere around here. That's not enough for the assessors to know some of the challenges that you may face, to understand, is it on pedestrian desire lines, you know, lighting, have we got services that are going to be in the way, power poles or the like. So they need a bit more detail than that. The next one is the appropriateness of the treatment. Okay, so what's being proposed, and is it going to address the issues that were presented, and is it the best way to do that? Could it be done better? And again, the classic here that the assessors will ask every time is, you know, could we have features that lower the speed as well? And this is very much when an application for something that will reduce the likelihood of chance, the chance that the crash will happen, like potentially this pedestrian crossing or a refuge island or some line marking or signage improvements, and say, well, can more be done for that? Could it be a raised pedestrian crossing, or could there be other features implemented? Also packed into that appropriateness, the assessors will be asking and doing some sort of critical analysis of, are we introducing any new risks, any unforeseen risks? So things like, are we going to have confusion of priority potentially? So little example here, which potentially could have confusion of priority with a painted mid-block treatment, which isn't a regulatory pedestrian crossing, so pedestrians don't have priority, but it kind of looks like that. We know as technical traffic engineers, road safety engineers, technical designers, that it doesn't have pedestrian priority, but are we slightly confusing some of the general public there? And is that presenting a new risk? Is it going to present risks to other road users? We're going to have a think about that as well. And can it be maintained, and are there going to be issues associated with maintenance or constructability? So there will be some assessment of those things. Now, in your assessment, you're going to be wanting to just note down any of this that you've already thought through. You've already thought through it, you've risk assessment, maybe you've got some advice. You put that in, and that's going to help the assessors understand that, this wasn't just unforeseen risk. This has been thought about and managed through a risk management process. And so you're going to go through that. The feasibility one is about, is this feasible from an engineering perspective? Have what they propose, can they build what they're proposing? And if they do, is it going to be durable? And is it just going to be a never-ending source of maintenance money requirements and those sorts of things? So the durability of the materials being used, is it feasible from a traffic perspective as well? How's that going to integrate? And any issues or concerns or challenges that are being faced, as I mentioned, you want to document those in your application so everybody's aware of it, but also take up that 30-minute discussion and put those on the table straight away, and we can have a chat about some of those challenges, the real world challenges of these projects and how we might be able to get around those. It could be, ramp grades, it could be ways that you interact there with other roads or shared path facilities. We can nut those out. Along those lines, the dreaded approvals. Well, we know that they can be very challenging for infrastructure projects, but if there's things put forward in the infrastructure application, the assessors are going to want confidence that that can actually be achieved. So the assessors will be super happy if they see things like a 30km/h speed limit associated with the infrastructure going in place, ticking lots of boxes there. But there will also be that question is, okay, well, what is the Department of Transport's view on this? And, is this actually going to be approved? Because what the assessors would be very concerned with is funding an application based on some of these ideas, and then it plays out that cannot be implemented because the approvals are not there, or the authority that needs to approve doesn't approve that. And then that would have been the funding of a project on a basis that another project may have warranted, had the assessors been aware that wasn't going to get funded. So in that sense, you're really going to want to be providing commentary from the relevant authorities that if it requires approval, like a speed limit reduction or a major traffic control item, or if it's interfacing with VicTrack land or the like, that you've got their support for this idea. Now, Chelsea mentioned the budget and the budget breakdown. And this one is in order for the assessors to be able to look at and say, yep, okay, there is enough money there to build what they're saying. They're not going to come back halfway through and say, we ran out of money. We can't build this. And also to show that value for money, that it's not exorbitant costs for a treatment. So in order to make that assessment, they need to know what is the itemized breakdown of costing for that design. So there's a good example. I mean, it doesn't need to be a full risk-based cost estimation, but it needs to be enough detail for people to be confident that it can be built for that price and that it's not asking just for extra money. And also within that, I sort of flagged that the assessors are quite aware if you're packing in there other things that are not really associated with the project, like just extra maintenance of the facility down the road or a bit of pothole treatment and those sort of things. So just really hone it in on what is going to give the best road safety outcomes and showing clearly that is a genuine estimate of the cost. So something like this with just a couple of line items, construct there for 172,000, design contract administration for 28,000. That's not enough for the assessors to make any determination if that's realistic or not without them doing a full cost estimation on your treatment, which they're not going to go through. They'll just say that's not enough cost estimation budgeting there. Again, Chelsea mentioned the innovation in this program, and I really do want everybody to think broadly about the definition of innovation there. I mean, innovation conjures up this idea of, this, I don't know, spinning roundabout that has flags and all sorts of bells and whistles that nobody's ever seen before. It doesn't need to be that. It can be process innovation, and it could be the way that you procure items in a way that means costs can be reduced. It could be that you're using new materials. It could, there's really a broad range of things, and we can chat about that in your one-on-one chat. Any ideas, or I can help you out with some ideas. It may be the way you actually go about evaluating it is the innovative approach, and there's some pretty exciting stuff in the evaluation space these days with cameras, and we've seen examples of projects in this program using some of that, camera technology for evaluation. It could be the utilization of different road safety risk metrics like ANRAM, IRAP, IRR, to be able to get some quantification of the reduction in trauma expected or what has been achieved in a prediction sense. So have a think about that, and in that evaluation, really detail, what is the design of the evaluation? What are the expected data outputs that you're going to get? And what pre-data do you need to collect, perhaps? So maybe having a think about, okay, this is how we might get the evaluation done. Grouping treatments. Grouping treatments certainly something that is encouraged under the correct framework. If it's two completely separate, unrelated projects that you've grouped only in the application is the only grouping that they're getting, that's not going to be seen favourably by the assessor. They will just simply say, well, that's two projects, and we will assess one of them, or we'll, but we're not going to start to just pack in until you get to the 100,000. So you don't need, it doesn't need to max out the 100,000. And in fact, value for money is a really critical component of this. So if you can get it done within a lower amount, and still has to be one-to-one contributed by the local government, but if it's $40,000 and local government's putting in $40,000, there's a nice $80,000 infrastructure package, and that would be seen quite favourably, as long as it's got all the other right elements. But if there is a logical reason for their grouping, perhaps you've got a local area traffic management study that shows how all the treatments interface, how it's going to create lower speed in the whole area, and that there's gateway treatments and the signage required, or whatever it is. If there's that rationale for grouping, then that's another nice tick. So have a think about when you're going to group, and happy to provide advice. A reminder that all infrastructure projects are subject to a road safety audit and a compliance audit. So that will be checking that what was funded was actually delivered. I mean, this is sort of best practice in infrastructure programs, the assurance that, yes, they were the objectives and that's how it was going to be achieved, and tick. We've had a look on the ground, we've measured the ramp grades, looked at that, and that was achieved. So just remember that that will be happening, and that is part of the program. So you don't need to allow for that within your within your application. That will happen from the TAC. The assessors are then going to say, yep, recommended, or recommended, but recommended with conditions, or this part of it is recommended, or this part's not recommended, and then that goes up to the panel and they will make the final decision. The technical support is available, so book in by sending it to the generic email address that you find on the TAC website, and book in your meeting, maybe have a bit of an idea of what you're planning and nut out a few of the ideas. If you're having challenges, we can talk those through. And lastly, there's some wonderful resources and information on the TAC website. The pre-application tips document, have a look at that. Got some great ideas and just making sure you've got everything packed into that application to give you the best possible chance of funding. And some wonderful grant case studies there. And a little bit of inspiration on what others have done and how they've got things funded. And also you'll find some fantastic videos there of a few of the treatments, which I love. I think it's wonderful stuff to see the this program on the ground and hearing from some of the people involved in it. So that's all from me. I'll end that. Hand back to
me.
CB.
Thanks, Ken. That was fantastic. Lots and lots of information, and we do have a right on time, which means we can have a couple of the questions that have been put in the chat. So we might kick off with the first one, which is, can analysis include detailed design? So I might start with you, Chels. It might be Ken and Chels to answer this one, but I'll start with Chels.
I'll provide as much as I can, and then when it gets hard, I'll flick on to Ken. But I'm guessing, so with this one, so you're looking at potentially a road safety audit at detailed design stage. And hopefully I've got the question right. So asking if that can be submitted as an analysis application. Yes, I would say the short answer is there's no reason why that couldn't be submitted. I would consider though, I guess, as I said, competitive grant round. So how does just doing the road safety audit compare with other projects that might have been submitted as analysis applications as well? So yeah, I guess you're looking at that comparison there. We also do be mindful, some infrastructure applications will come through that include a detailed design in them. So potentially you're not at that stage yet, but yeah, I think it's just considering what other applications might come in and where yours kind of sits in the grand scheme of things. Ken, you might want to add to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think you've done well there, Chelsea. So really the purpose of the analysis is to identify the areas of highest risk and to shape up treatments associated with that. And so I suppose the detailed design, so getting your survey done and then doing your drainage design and all of those aspects of it could be part of that, but in most of the successful applications has been done as part of the construction $100,000 grant. So you've got a concept, you've done your analysis, you've found the location, you've sort of done, you've gone, power poles here and the drainage, so we're just going to have to think about that, and made some notes and say, yeah, okay, these are going to be nutted out in detailed design, but we're fully aware of them. It then lends itself more to the infrastructure to design and build. And the analysis is more about that. Well, we know this area's got issues. Which particular one are we going to do? Then maybe within that, you go to a level of functional design and even almost into a bit of detail as well. But really just purely saying, yeah, we know exactly what we're going to do. We know where we're going to do it, and we need 20,000 with the TAC to do detailed design, probably not going to be the strongest analysis application.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Ken and Chels. The second question we have here is, can we undertake a mix of infrastructure treatments plus community road safety activities? So we'll start with you, Chels, on that one.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. If you can do both, then that's great. I mean, depending on what sort of supporting activities they are, I'd be mindful that the priority, if you're applying for an infrastructure grant, that's the main priority. I guess we've got our community grant. So if you're doing too much community work, does that then actually sit more so in that stream? So yes, if it's supporting work, I would say absolutely it'll be looked at favourably. I'd just be mindful of how much is allocated to infrastructure and how much is that community support. But yeah, if you can do both, I think it's great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think there's probably a little bit of innovation tick already, isn't it? If you're starting to think about that. But yeah, I mean, if it's $95,000 worth of community behavioural change initiatives and a couple of signs, it's probably not an infrastructure project, is it?
Yeah, and I would just add to that, think about that in the community engagement sphere too, if this is really adding to what you're doing. So for example, if whatever the project infrastructure is and it's about engaging the school in that process, and then you're giving them some supporting documents to reinforce the behaviours you want to see because of that infrastructure, then that's a really great holistic way to be thinking about things. So yeah, that would be my view, is to think about it from that engagement perspective as well. We have a question here about contingency in budgets, and can it be included in the cost breakdown?
Yeah, look, this is one we've sort of toyed with a little bit over the last few years, but where we have landed with this is that we're funding deliverables. I understand that a contingency plan is probably good project management, but we're not going to be funding for potentially things that might happen. So everything runs to plan and that contingency doesn't get used and we funded it. So that's where it kind of becomes a little bit difficult. So our preference is, and this is what we've lent to for the previous round, is that council would cover the contingency for the project.
Thanks, Chels. So we've just got a couple of quick ones left, and then that's about all that we've had come through. So this is a quick question around, can we resubmit previous applications?
Yep, absolutely no reason why you couldn't. So I'm guessing if it's an unsuccessful application, my tip there would be, obviously it's going to need to be better than the first one that was potentially, or big, a bit better than the first one that maybe didn't get up. And I think it would be really showing that you've taken the feedback that was given by assessors as to why it was potentially not funded and somehow incorporated that into the new application. And look, we offer the 15 minutes of feedback after people are notified about their application. So hopefully you took up that opportunity to have a chat to us about why. And that, yeah, I would just say really make sure that you incorporate that feedback into the application. And look, maybe it was a strong application, but somehow it potentially just didn't quite get up to the top. Like if we've got a lot of applications, sometimes even strong applications might not necessarily get through. So it's just, yeah, it's about how can you probably bolster the application second time around. Don't just submit the exact same thing, I would say.
Great, fantastic. Now, there was just a little comment which I think Ken has actually addressed in his preso, which is you can actually go onto our website and view list of previous funded applications. So check out what happened last round if you wanted to. And I'm just going to see if there's any last questions because we are just reaching the end.
Just pop through there, CB.
Yes. So to what extent does the proposed infrastructure need to be part of larger scale projects or overall initiatives specific in the area? So will a singular pedestrian crossing in a rural township likely to be knocked back, even though it aligns well to the technical criteria?
Yeah, look, not necessarily, I would say. Like if that's clearly a road safety issue and it needs to be addressed, then it's going to be seen favourably. I guess when I speak about that, is it part of a bigger overall approach? It's just about, can that project potentially be integrated into other council thinking, or a bit of broader picture kind of stuff is favourable. But yes, at the end of the day, we're looking for projects that obviously there's a really strong need that something needs to be done. So if that means it's one single wombat crossing in a small rural town, then that's okay. It's not, because it's not part of a bigger overall initiative, it doesn't mean it will get knocked back. So it's more about the need there, I would say. Ken, I don't know if you have any more comments on that.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up well. Certainly, trying to align it with strategies or plans is an advantageous thing. But at the end of the day, it's about doing the best job at reducing trauma for pedestrians and cyclists and other road users as well. So if that can clearly be shown, then it'll be looked on favourably.
Fantastic. And I know, you know, councils are you've just been through a stage of planning for your next 4-year plan. So there should be some really great, some great indicators of what the community's expectations are around particular areas. And we always know that transport and travel are really top issues for communities. So, so look to those documents as well to provide that sort of big picture thinking around why you're doing what you're doing. I think that's all we've got. As I said, this is recorded, so we will provide this recording and we'll let you know when that's up on our website for you to access. But there's also all those other bits and pieces that will be sitting on our website for you to be, in the meantime, going in and having a good look at, and encourage those 30-minute consultations as well if you think that's going to add some value. We hope that it would add some value, so think about taking those up. But otherwise, if there's no other questions, which I don't think we have, we will wrap it up. So everyone have a lovely Friday, even though it's wet and cold, but that, you know, hopefully it gets a little better. And we're really looking forward to seeing the applications for this round. So thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks so much. Bye.